Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a really big stack of research, some incredible real-world strategies from elite performers, and we're going to try and turn them into a blueprint.
A blueprint for how you operate.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And the mission today is, well, it's arguably one of the most vital topics in modern life. Focus.
Mhm.
But we're not looking at focus in that, soft motivational sense. This isn't about just try harder.
No, exactly. We're looking at the design principles, the operational design of world-class attention. We've pulled strategies from, top executives, championship coaches, Olympic athletes.
Right.
And if you're someone who believes that focus is a trait you were either born with it or you weren't, I think this is going to completely overhaul that belief.
Okay.
Our sources, they all point to the same thing. Focus is a system. It's an environment you construct, and it's a perimeter you have to, aggressively defend.
I love that framing. A system you install, not a discipline you force. It feels so much more actionable.
It is.
And we've got this fantastic blend of, behavioral psychology on one hand, and then these brutal real-world anecdotes on the other. The kind of stories that only happen when the stakes are just incredibly high.
Absolutely.
So we're going to unpack 4 key systems. And the idea is that when you install these together, they create that focused environment for you. We'll talk about how to protect your attention, how to manage context switches.
That's a huge one.
Huge. How to train your execution for when chaos inevitably hits. And crucially, how to achieve emotional recovery. So, yesterday's baggage doesn't sink today's critical work.
Right. And I think we should start with the foundation, which is, physical and temporal. If focus is an environment, you have to stop treating time like it's this boundless thing and build a rigid container for it.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's start with, I guess, the ultimate example of this. Bill Gates and his famous Think Week.
Yes.
You have to picture Microsoft in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
This is an organization that is, completely dominant. They're winning the entire personal computing era.
Right. But winning means chaos.
It's total chaos. Every single day is just an inbox that keeps refilling itself. Busy is like the default operating system for everyone.
And the problem with that perpetual busyness, which Gates obviously realized, is that it forces you to be reactive.
Always putting out fires.
Always. If your day is just dictated by the loudest ping, you're only ever going to solve the immediate small-scale problems. You're never going to see the massive generational threats or opportunities that are just over the horizon.
So he needed a way out.
An escape hatch.
It's a structural escape hatch. And that's what the Think Week was. A secluded retreat, a cabin somewhere, zero contact, just pure, uninterrupted thinking.
And this is the key distinction, right? This wasn't a vacation.
Oh, not at all. The sources are really clear on this. It was compression, not relaxation.
Compression.
Yeah. The goal was intense cognitive load. He would literally cart boxes of reading material with him. Memos, research papers, sometimes like 100 different documents.
And he'd spend the entire week just in deep absorption. And he didn't just read them. He would write and send back these long, incredibly specific feedback notes to his teams.
And then he'd write an executive summary himself at the end. It's like he was turning solitude into this massive centralized decision engine.
Completely insulated from the daily noise.
And the proof is in the output. This is why this story is legendary. The most famous result of this whole practice was that 1995 memo.
The Internet tidal wave.
The Internet tidal wave, dated May 26, 1995. He used that uninterrupted runway to see that the Internet wasn't just, an add-on or a feature.
It's everything.
It was becoming the central organizing principle of all of technology.
Yeah.
And Microsoft had to pivot immediately or it was going to perish.
And that is the absolute definition of proactive focus. Most of us, we operate in reactive focus mode. We only really focus when a deadline is screaming at us or an alarm is going off.
Right, the emergency.
Gates built a calendar shape, this huge, undeniable 7-day block that made it structurally impossible to miss the big signals. The real thing he was protecting wasn't just silence, it was an uninterrupted runway.
That phrase, uninterrupted runway, immediately makes me think of the biggest enemy of focus today, which is this idea of attention residue.
Yeah.
Can we dive into that? Because the science here is so critical.
We have to. The attention residue tax is probably the single biggest drain on modern knowledge work. And we all know that moment. You're deep into a complex report, you're in the zone, and you think, oh, I'll just quickly reply to this one Slack message.
Just one.
Just one. And by the time you get back to the report, your hands are on the keyboard, you're physically there, but mentally. You're still carrying the emotional weight or the context of that last interaction. You're carrying residue.
And this is a measurable thing, right? It's not just a feeling.
No, it's a real measurable phenomenon. There are studies, you can find them in places like Science Direct, that show when you switch tasks, especially between cognitively demanding tasks, part of your mind, like a cognitive shadow, stays stuck on the previous activity. It's like a mental browser tab that you forgot to close.
It's interference.
Total interference. If you switch from task A, say a writing strategy, to task B, a quick email argument.
We've all been there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The context from A is interfering with your performance on B, and then the stress from B is retroactively interfering when you try to get back to A. Your performance is just tanked. Gates designed the Think Week to minimize the number of times that tax could even be charged. It wasn't about willpower. It was about making interruption impossible by design.
So if we translate that, the core principle is focus is an environment you build. It's not a trait. The reason most of us feel so undisciplined is that our day is, well, it's designed to create maximum attention residue. We work in fragments.
And the duration of those fragments is absolutely critical. Our sources really emphasize this. Time is the container focus needs. A quick 12-minute block, that's barely enough to even get started. You're just recalling what you did yesterday.
So what's the minimum effective dose then?
You start to see real performance when you hit the 90-minute mark. A 90-minute block is what you need to push past that initial warm-up phase.
Is there something magic about 90 minutes?
It connects to our ultradian rhythms, these cycles of mental peaks and troughs that happen in, roughly 90 to 120-minute periods. But practically speaking, 90 minutes is the time you need to overcome that cognitive drag, open up all the necessary mental tabs for true depth, and actually start executing before you get too tired.
Okay, so 90 minutes is good, but what about the really big blocks? Like a half-day block, 4 hours? That sounds brutal for the average person juggling meetings in life.
That's where the high-leverage work lives.
Yeah.
If you can protect a half-day block, say 3 or 4 hours, you move beyond just execution. You get into production. Yeah, that duration is long enough to clarify a whole strategy or write an entire draft of a difficult document. You can produce something meaningful that actually changes a core decision. That's converting thinking into leverage.
Okay, I like that challenge. Most of us don't have a week in a remote cabin, so let's get actionable. How do you run a personal mini Think Week?
First, you schedule it. Find a 2 to 4 hour block. Ideally first thing in the morning when you have less residue from the day before. And you treat it like an offsite with yourself, focused on one single strategic question that you've written down beforehand.
And this next part is crucial, right? For defending that block. You have to batch your inputs and then ban them. This is where everyone fails.
Everyone. They start their deep work block and then realize, oh, I need 3 more pieces of data. So they open their email and boom, the residue tax gets charged.
So batching means getting everything you need. Documents, data, coffee before the clock starts.
And then during the block, you work with what you have. No new inputs, no browsing rabbit holes, no checking Slack for just one quick thing. That's banning inputs.
And the output, it has to be concrete. You can't just have aimless thinking time. It needs to be translated into leverage.
Exactly.
You recommend the one-page memo at the end. Can you walk through that structure?
Yeah, the structure forces synthesis. When the timer goes off, you write down 3 things. 3 facts you establish. What did you actually learn? 3 implications of those facts. What does this mean? And 3 next actions. What specifically do I do now?
And there's one last piece.
Right. 1, if I had more time note, which is basically, what's the next big strategic question this uncovered? It stops you from leaving that block feeling like you just spun your wheels. It turns thought into momentum.
Okay, so that's the container. But what about the internal stuff? The brain will just generate random urgencies. Did I pay that bill? I should organize the garage.
That's where the switching quarantine list comes in. It's a defense mechanism. If the urge to check email or do something else pops up, you just capture it on a physical notepad labeled later. You don't act on it, you don't judge it, you just quarantine it.
The brain registers it, knows it's been stored, and lets you get back to work without paying the tax. It's a genius little cognitive hack.
So once you've created that container, the next step is to reduce what even gets near it. And this brings us to Steve Jobs, who approached focus not by adding, but through just ruthless subtraction.
Right. The setting here is Jobs returning to Apple in 1997. If Gates was about building a time container, Jobs was all about defending the perimeter by eliminating sprawl.
And Apple was a classic case of a company dying under the weight of its own ambition.
Total sprawl. They had dozens of different computer models, too many side projects, too many initiatives. Everyone had a good reason for their own project. But in total, the company was just hemorrhaging attention and clarity.
They were aiming at too many targets at once.
And so you get this iconic story where Jobs grabs a marker in a strategy meeting, walks to a whiteboard, and he doesn't draw a plan of addition. He draws a structure of constraint, that simple 2x2 grid.
Consumer Pro versus Desktop Portable, 4 quadrants. That was it.
And he just tells the team, we can only build 4 great products, and everything else was just canceled.
Regardless of how promising it seemed, it was a radical act. Subtraction became the strategy. And for the first time in years, the company's focus was legible. Everyone knew what they were not supposed to be working on.
It's one thing to draw the grid, but the willpower to execute those no's, that must have been immense. And that's the principle people miss about focus. They think it's just a louder yes.
And Jobs taught us it's fundamentally a disciplined no. Every single additional yes, every new project, every open loop, it becomes a cognitive competitor for your attention.
And if you have 10 half-started projects,
You're paying 10 little attention residue taxes all at the same time. You pay for that indecision with diluted thinking. Your mind is stuck on all the things you might do, which just kills the quality of what you were doing. Indecision is expensive. Constraint is the answer.
and constraint on a whiteboard is defensible. A priority in your head is negotiable.
Exactly. It's a non-negotiable rule of the system.
So how do we actually internalize that? How do we build that discipline?
You start by installing the constraint on your own schedule. Draw your own 2x2 grid. Label it now, later, and high impact, low impact.
Okay.
And the discipline is this. You limit the high impact now quadrant to only 2 items. Just 2 things that get the bulk of your best energy this week. Everything else is a deliberate not yet.
That seems incredibly restrictive.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the whole point. It forces you to define what winning looks like.
It does. And second, you make your no specific. Keep a no list, not just projects, but behaviors. I will not check email before 11 a.m. I will not go to a meeting that doesn't have an agenda.
Those tactical no's protect the big strategic yeses.
They do. And for the new opportunities that always pop up, you use what we call the macro sense filter. A project can make perfect sense in a micro way. It's fun, the money is good.
Sure.
But you have to ask, if I do this, what existing high-impact now project gets worse because my attention has to move? And if the answer is something critical, then the answer has to be no.
So a focused life isn't measured by what you juggle. It's measured by what you refuse to carry.
That refusal is the foundation.
Okay, so once you've built a container and defended the perimeter, the next challenge is managing the constant stream of different cognitive demands, the internal and external switches. Which brings us to Jack Dorsey.
And his solution for running 2 massive companies at the same time.
Right, around 2011, he's trying to split his time between Twitter, which is this huge cultural phenomenon, and Square, which is fighting this brutal war in fintech. And the assumption was he was just some kind of superhuman multitasker.
But the reality was the exact opposite. He knew that trying to handle a Twitter PR crisis and a Square engineering problem in the same afternoon would just lead to total cognitive meltdown.
Right.
So his solution was a structural constraint, the themed schedule. He didn't multitask. He scheduled different cognitive gears for different days.
And these themes were really specific.
They were rigid, and that's the key. Monday was for management. Tuesday was product, Wednesday was marketing and growth, Thursday was partnerships, and Friday was company culture and recruiting.
But hold on, that sounds great for a CEO, but what about the average person? You get a 5-alarm fire from a client on the wrong day. What do?
That's the critical distinction. The point of the theme isn't to avoid interruptions. They're going to happen. The value is in the fast recovery and the reduced switch costs. Dorsey said he could deal with an interruption and then snap right back because it's Tuesday. I know I need to focus on product stuff. The day's core job was pre-decided.
So that pre-decision saves you from that crippling cognitive tax we talked about, the cost of constantly changing gears.
It's so expensive because you have to load a new set of rules and parameters into your brain every time you switch. The APA has research on this. Heavy multitasking just degrades performance because your mind isn't built for it.
And the attention residue just keeps compounding. If you switch from, I don't know, a legal review to creative writing, the residue from that dry, precise language just pollutes your creative flow.
You're trying to operate under 2 sets of rules at once. Theming minimizes how many times you change those fundamental gears. By dedicating a whole day to product stuff, Dorsey kept the mental framework, the vocabulary, the priorities consistent.
You're batching similar types of work.
Exactly. You're working in one domain for an extended period, not 5.
So how do we adapt this principle? We're all running multiple lives, work, family, side hustles.
First, don't try to theme 7 days. Pick 3 to 5 core themes. Maybe something like deep work, shallow admin work, and strategic planning. You're theming the type of thinking, not the specific subject.
Okay. And for the inevitable fires.
You have to create an explicit off-theme parking lot. When an urgent, non-matching request comes in, you don't act on it immediately. You capture it, you acknowledge it, put it on a list for the right day, and get back to work. You're telling your brain, I see you, but the system says later.
And I imagine you need buffers.
Yes, a switch cost buffer. If you have a hard shift, say from creative work to a finance review, you put a mandatory 10-minute transition in between. And that's not for checking social media, it's for clearing the residue. You close the old tabs, write down the next steps for that task to disengage fully, and then you open the new file.
That 10-minute buffer is like clearing the cache on your computer before you run a new program.
It's exactly that. And finally, you have to pre-decide your interruption rule. If you just check messages whenever they arrive, you lose the whole theme. You decide, I handle urgent messages at 12:30 and 4:30. The rule protects the theme.
Okay, so we've built the environment, we've managed the switching. Now we get to the moment of truth. What happens when chaos hits the system? Because even the best system fails under pressure unless the operator is trained for it. And this takes us from the boardroom to the pool with Michael Phelps.
Right. The 2008 Beijing Olympics, the 200-meter butterfly final, Phelps is going for this historic number of gold medals. The whole world is watching. He dives in, everything's perfect, and then chaos. His goggles fail.
They fill with water.
Completely fill with water. He later said he couldn't see the wall.
This is where elite performance just snaps. The brain panics. Where am I? How far is the wall? You can't answer those questions, and if you have to think about what to do, you've already lost.
But he didn't panic. He just stayed in the race plan. The exact tempo, the turns, the stroke count, all stuff, he had rehearsed thousands of times, physically and mentally.
He was relying entirely on internal cues.
Completely. He knew exactly how many strokes it took to get from one end to the other without needing to see the black line on the bottom of the pool.
And he wins gold and sets a world record, swimming blind. The lesson here is that in the most distracting moment imaginable, he didn't invent a new plan, he just executed an old one.
And that is the principle. Focus under pressure is pre-decided attention. When chaos hits, your job is not to think. It's to execute an old plan.
So let's talk about the science behind that. Why is this if-then pre-planning so powerful?
It's supported by a ton of research on what are called implementation intentions. The research shows that if you create simple if-then scripts, if situation X happens, then I will do Y, you drastically increase the odds of sticking to your goal, even when you're stressed or tired.
So why does that simple structure work so much better than just resolving to focus better?
Because a general goal like focus better relies on your executive function, your willpower. And that's the first thing that stress and chaos just completely depletes.
Right.
An implementation intention, though, it creates an automatic trigger. When the condition X happens, the response Y is basically a hotkey in your brain. It bypasses the deliberation phase where panic lives.
So you pre-script the reaction to prevent the panic from ever getting a foothold.
Precisely. You rehearse the task, you rehearse the disruption, and you attach an automated response.
Okay, let's make this actionable for, say, a knowledge worker. We need our own goggles scenarios.
Exactly. Start by writing down your top 3. The 3 distractions most likely to break your concentration. Is it a loud Slack notification, stressful email? Is it just the urge to check the news? Be specific.
And then for each one, you write a simple pre-scripted if-then response.
Like
if I feel the urge to check my phone, then I will write the urge on my later list and work for 10 more minutes.
And the response has to be small and immediate. And then you visualize it, like an athlete. Do a 20-second videotape visualization before you start your focus block.
So you literally see the disruption happening.
You see the disruption, and then you immediately see yourself executing the plan. You're installing a software patch that your brain will default to when stress hits.
So if Phelps taught us about internal training, the McLaren Formula One pit crew teaches us about externalizing that training, giving attention a visible, concrete target.
Yeah, the setting is 2011. McLaren's pit stops were already fast, around 3 seconds, but their rivals were getting faster. In F1, tenths of a second are everything.
So they bring in a performance analyst.
Stafford Murray, and he studied one thing: what separated the fastest stops from the slightly slower ones. It wasn't muscle or speed.
And pit lane is just total cognitive overload, extreme urgency, noise, bodies moving everywhere.
The definition of pressure. And Murray found the difference was in the mechanics' eyes. The slower mechanics, their focus was scattered. They were glancing at the wrong things, which introduced these tiny, invisible delays.
And he applied this concept of the quiet eye. That's a sports psychology term.
It is. The quiet eye is a sustained, steady visual fixation on the critical target just before the critical movement. And experts consistently hold that fixation longer.
And in a pit stop, the critical target is brutally clear.
The wheel nut. It's the only thing that matters before the wrench engages.
And this is where it gets so brilliantly simple. The fix was to paint the wheel nuts orange.
It sounds almost absurd, but it's an absolute attention hack. They made the critical target visually loud, impossible to ignore under pressure.
So all the other visual clutter, the car, the asphalt, the other mechanics, it's all filtered out by this blazing orange target.
And the result was the 2012 German Grand Prix, a world best pit stop of 2.31 seconds. Focus improved because they gave attention a concrete, high-contrast target instead of just aimlessness.
And for the knowledge worker, that's so key. Distraction isn't just your phone. It's aimlessness. It's sitting down to write without deciding what success looks like for the next 25 minutes. Our desktop is like 12 unpainted wheel nuts.
Exactly. So we have to translate the principle. First, name the wheel nut before you begin. Write down one observable metric for success, not work on the strategy. It has to be draft the first 150 words of the introduction, singular and observable.
And then use a 10-second quiet eye start.
Yeah. Before you type, before you move the mouse, just hold your still attention on the exact starting point. The first cell in the spreadsheet, the first sentence, for 10 seconds. It tells your brain precisely where the work begins.
And literally reduce the visual clutter. Go full screen on the document, hide the sidebars. If you don't paint the wheel nut orange, your brain won't know where to hold its fixation. It'll just drift.
Right. So we built the container, managed the switching, trained the execution. But there's one last persistent internal distraction that can derail everything. The emotional aftermath of a win or a loss.
And this is where Nick Saban, the legendary college football coach, provides such an essential lesson. The 24-hour rule.
Yeah, the Alabama football program operates under this famous rule. Whether it's after a crushing loss or a massive championship win, the team gets exactly 24 hours to process it, to celebrate, to vent. And then, the file is closed. Focus shifts to the next opponent.
And on the surface, that can seem really restrictive, especially after a huge win. But Saban's logic is purely operational. He saw that the enemy wasn't just external distraction, it was internal distraction.
Rumination, victory laps, shame spirals, all of it is attention spent on yesterday's story, which you can't change.
And we know from psychology, right? The brain loves unfinished, emotionally charged stories. That's the Zeigarnik effect.
Exactly. Our minds are compelled to keep rehearsing those high-stakes moments. That's why attention residue is so sticky. Your brain insists on dedicating resources to the emotional file you haven't closed.
What's so fascinating is that the rule applies just as much to success. Why is a victory lap as dangerous as a shame spiral?
Because success invites complacency. It encourages you to rewatch the highlight reel instead of running the next rep. It focuses your attention on the fixed outcome, not the controllable process needed for the next task.
So Saban's rule is a system for containing that emotion. It sets a non-negotiable time box around it, forcing closure.
The discipline isn't about not feeling. It's about not letting the feeling hijack your performance tomorrow. It forces focus back onto the controllables.
Right. The default habit is letting yesterday's emotions run today's schedule. The focused habit is giving the emotion a time window and then redirecting attention.
So we need a system that mimics this, but on a smaller scale. We call it the mini rule. You don't need 24 hours for a bad meeting. Set a timer for 24 minutes or even 10 minutes after a win or a setback. Use that time to vent or reflect, and when the buzzer goes off, you pivot.
And that processing time needs structure. You can't just wallow. You have to do a film review, not a story review.
What's the difference?
The facts versus the story. The facts are objective. What happened? Who said what? The story is subjective. What I'm telling myself about my competence or their motives, the brain wants to replay the story. The system forces you back to the facts. You extract the data, not the drama.
And this is another perfect place for an implementation intention, an if-then reset for rumination.
How does that work?
You treat the thought pattern like an interruption. For example, If I catch myself replaying that awkward meeting, then I will verbally say, next, take one deep breath, and open the document for my next task.
That physical and verbal cue, the word next, the breath, it creates a definitive moment of transition. It's harder for the brain to ignore.
And finally, to ensure closure, you always finish that review by identifying one singular, controllable next action. Don't just end with a vague feeling, and with, my immediate next step is to schedule that follow-up email. It converts reflection into forward momentum.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, from the cabin to the pit lane. But the synthesis, I think, is really clear. Focus is not some mysterious talent. It is a trainable, defensible system that you install.
We started by designing the container with Bill Gates, making sure we have that uninterrupted runway, and understanding the crippling tax of attention residue.
Then we protected that container's perimeter with Steve Jobs' disciplined no, recognizing that focus is subtraction.
We moved into managing the switches with Jack Dorsey's thematic.
And the key takeaway through all of it is that elite performers don't try to force focus with willpower. They install systems that make focus the default path and distraction the high-friction alternative. Willpower is fragile. A good system is robust.
So we'll leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over this week. If you accept that your attention is your scarcest, most valuable resource, what is one major commitment or one open loop in your life right now that you will draw a hard boundary around this week, using one of these tactics to rigorously defend your attention and claim your runway?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this system helps you build the focused environment you need to do your most important work.